All right, so we are going to continue with 10-2, just a separate day. I wanted to split it up a little bit to make it a little more easy to understand. So last class we talked about central angles and types of arcs. Excuse me. Today we're going to talk about arc length and how to find it. So arc length is just the length of any arc. And like I said, this is a continuation of chapter 10.2. Okay. A formula for finding arc length is that arc length equals the measure of your arc, which is what we just talked about, divided by 360 times your circumference. Just remember that circumference here is 2 pi r or d pi. So in this picture, we have circle P, okay? They tell us that PR, which is a radius, is 9. They tell us that angle QPR is 120 degrees. Find the length of arc QR. Okay. So we are trying to find an arc length of QR. If we plug into this formula, we need the measure of the arc first. So the measure of this arc would be 120 because it's just the central angle. Divided by 360 times whatever our circumference is. So our circumference would be, and we don't need to put the C here. Our circumference is just this. So 2 pi times 9. So to write that in simpler terms, I can do 120 divided by 360. That is a third. I can simplify. 120 goes into 360 3 times, so I can simplify that to 1 over 3. And 2 times 9 is 18, so 18 pi. Now remember that 18 pi is a number, so I can essentially, if I'm looking at two fractions, think of it as it's over 1. So I can multiply across. So 1 times 18 pi is 18 pi. 3 times 1 is 3. So now I have 18 pi over 3. Does 3 go into 18? Yes, it does. It goes in 6 times. So I have 6 pi. So 18 divided by 3 is 6, so I'm left with 6 pi. Now in your calculator, I would prefer you to go ahead and do it. If I asked you to leave it in radians, that would be an answer, but I want an actual length. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in my calculator. So I'm just going to do 6 pi, and that gives me 18.8. That is my arc length. Okay. If you didn't want to do all these simplifying steps, you could have stopped right here, and I'm gonna put my phone over it so you can see. You could have stopped right here and just started to put this in the calculator. You could have done 120 divided by 360 equals 0.3333 repeating times 2 times pi times 9. And you still would have got 18.8. So you can just go ahead and do it in your calculator right away. I find it easier to simplify just to make sure I'm doing everything correctly. Now down here, it says use P to find use circle P to find the length of each arc. Round to the nearest hundredth. Okay, I'm not super concerned about rounding. So if this is 70, that's 50. We know MT is a diameter. So this area is 180 and so is this area. I also can see that these are vertical angles. So if that's 70, this is 70. Okay, that's one piece. And then now let's use the fact that we have semicircles. So MTS is a semicircle. So I know if that's 70, this should be 110 because those two should add to 180. I also know that this is 70. This piece should add to 110, so it adds to 180. Or basically, I can just do 180 minus 70, which is 110, minus 50, which would be 60. Okay. So I've now figured out all the angles, which means I have the measure of the arcs. Because remember that the angles are just the measure of the arc is just the central angle. So I have all the measures of the arcs. I have that part of my formula. Now they want to know arc RT, the arc length of RT. Now remember, arc length is different than measure of the arc. Those are two different things. Measure is talking about degrees. Arc length is a measure, is a length of something. So RT, what is the length of RT if MT equals 7? So MT is a whole diameter. So they're saying diameter equals 7. Okay. So now let's plug into our formula. I'm going to use my lighter pencil here. So we're trying to find arc length RT. Okay, the first thing we should be plugging into the formula is the measure of the arc. So the measure of RT is 50 over our usual 360 times circumference. We have D, we have diameter, so we're going to use D pi. That's our formula that we're going to use. Okay, so multiplying by D pi would be 7 pi. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and do this in my calculator. So I'm going to do 50 divided by 360 and then times 7 pi. And that gives me 3.05 as my arc length. Okay. All right, next one, MST. MST is this, that's a whole 180. And they give us that MP, a radius, is 2. And our arc measure is 180. So those are the two things I know here, okay? So MST will equal my measure of my arc, 180 over 360, times my circumference, and I'm going to use, so my circumference formulas are 2 pi r and d pi. I have the radius, so I'm going to use 2 pi r. 2 pi times r, which is 2. So now in my calculator, I'm going to do 180 divided by 360. That's 0.5 times, and I'm just going to do 4 pi because I know 2 times 2 is 4. That's 6.28. So MST, arc length of MST is 6.28. And this is yards. I forgot to label. This is inches. That's important. We should always label our units. All right, last two here. NR, our arc length, our arc measure is 60. And they said PR, which is a radius, is 13. So I'm going to use those two pieces of information. I'm still using this formula here. So measure of arc was 60, so I'm going to do 60 divided by 360. And then I'm going to do my circumference formula. I'm going to use the 2 pi r one because I have a radius. So 2 pi times 13. Okay, so now in my calculator, I'm going to do 60 divided by 360. And then I'm going to multiply that by 26 pi because 2 times 13 is 26. So NR, arc length NR, is 13.61. And that is feet. Okay, I'm on my last one here. The unit is centimeters. It's arc misses, MRS. So MRS is 180 and 70. That is 250. So I'm doing 250 over 360. And MRS, guys, I'm going to use a different pencil here. MRS is this whole thing. So pretty much all of 360 minus 110. Okay. Or I could just add up 70, 60, 50, and 70, and I will get 250. So 250 divided by 360 times, they said NS, which is a whole diameter. So diameter is 10. So I'm going to use the formula C equals D pi. So 10 pi. And this is going to be centimeters when I find it. So I'm just going to plug this in my calc now. So 250 divided by 360 times 10 pi, and I get 21.81. Okay. So this is how you find arc length. Make sure that you always put your units on here, and make sure that you are always having this formula handy and these formulas handy. Okay, if you have any questions, you know where I am, 11 to 12 o'clock video chat. Have a great day.